have a shared characteristic and a specific characteristic. In every Dharma, there is a shared and a specific characteristic for each. For example, the horse is a shared characteristic, but its whiteness is a specific characteristic. The man is a shared characteristic, but the fact that he has lost an ear is a specific characteristic. Thus for each series there is a generic and a specific characteristic. Therefore it is said that all dharmas have a shared and a specific characteristic. 8. They have a characteristic of support. Taken separately and together, dharmas rely upon one another. For example, the plants, the trees, the mountains and the rivers rest on the earth and the earth rests on the water. Thus, as all things rest one upon the other, it is said that all dharmas have a characteristic of support, and that this characteristic of support embraces all dharmas. These unitary categories of dharma are applicable to every dharma. 2. Groups of several dharmas. Moreover, groups of two dharmas include all dharmas. Material dharmas and immaterial dharmas. Visible and invisible. Resistant and non-resistant. Impure and pure, conditioned and unconditioned, inner and outer, vision dharma and object, existence dharma and non-existence dharma, and many other binary groups of this kind. Groups of 3, 4, 5, 6 and even an infinity of dharmas include all dharmas. These dharmas are all empty as I have said above. This is what is called the emptiness of all dharmas. 3. What is the use of making lists of empty dharmas? Question. If dharmas are all empty, why give them different names? Answer. Out of ignorance or error, worldly people seize characteristics in empty dharmas and thus give rise to the conflicting emotions, such as desire. As a result of these passions, they carry out all kinds of actions. Carrying out all kinds of actions, they enter into all sorts of destinies. Entering into all sorts of destinies, they take up all kinds of existences. Taking up all kinds of existences, they suffer all kinds of suffering and happiness. They are like the silkworm that, emitting silk without any reason, becomes rolled up within this silk that came out of itself and undergoes the torments of cooking or boiling water. By the power of his pure wisdom, the saint analyzed all these dharmas which, from beginning to end, are empty. Wanting to save beings, he speaks to them of these places of attachment that are the 5 skandhas, the 12 bases of consciousness and the 18 elements, and says to them, "You others, it is only out of ignorance that you give rise to the 5 aggregates, etc. And you become attached to what you yourselves have made." If the saint spoke only about emptiness, beings would not find body, for this emptiness, being caused by nothing, would not call forth disgust. 4. New controversy in regard to emptiness. 1. The specific characteristics of conditioned dharmas are empty and indeterminate. Question. You say that all dharmas are empty, but that is not correct. Why? Because all dharmas are integrated each within their own specific characteristic. Earth has as characteristic solidity, water. Has as characteristic moistness, fire has as characteristic heat. Wind has as characteristic motion, the mind has as characteristic discernment, wisdom has as characteristic knowledge. All these dharmas reside each in its own characteristic. Why do you say they're empty? Answer. I have already refuted that in connection with the emptiness of essences and the emptiness of specific characteristics, but I must repeat myself here. 1. Since the characteristics are not determinate, they are not real characteristics. Thus, cheese, honey, glue, wax, etc. have the characteristic of earth, namely, solidity. But if they are brought near fire, they lose their own characteristic and take on the characteristic of moistness, which is that of water. If gold, silver, copper and iron are brought to the fire, they also lose their own characteristic and take on that of water, namely, moistness. Water, in cold weather, becomes ice and takes on the characteristic of earth, namely solidity. A man who is drunk, or asleep, or a man who is in the absorption without mind, a frozen fish, have neither mind nor consciousness. They lose their characteristic of thinking and no longer have any discernment. Wisdom, which has knowledge as characteristic, as soon as it penetrates the empty nature of dharmas, no longer has discernment and loses its characteristic of knowledge. This is why the dharmas have no determined characteristic. 2. Moreover, it is not correct that dharmas have a determined characteristic. Why? The characteristic of future dharma cannot come into the present, for, if it did come into the present, it would lose its character of future. If it came into the present without losing its characteristic of future, the future would be the present, and there would no longer be any fruit of retribution in the future. If the present entered 294 C into the past, it would lose its character of present. If it entered into the past without losing its characteristic of present, the past would be the present. From all these faults, we know that dharmas have no fixed characteristic. 2. Unconditioned dharmas are without characteristics. Moreover, if, as you assert, unconditioned dharmas exist in a definite way, they would each separately have a specific characteristic, in the same way that fire has the characteristic of heat. But by definition, it is the fact of not depending on a foreign cause that constitutes their nature. This is why we know that unconditioned dharmas, having no characteristic, are really non-existent. If you say that the cessation not due to knowledge takes place in the future existence, it would be a conditioned dharma, whereas, by definition, there is no conditioned dharma there. If you say that the cessation not due to knowledge has cessation as characteristic, that also is not correct. Why? Because here it is a matter of the characteristic of cessation due to impermanence and not the characteristic of the cessation not due to knowledge. For these many reasons, there is no determinate characteristic. If dharmas had a determinate characteristic, they would be real. Outside of determinate characteristic, there can be no real dharma. 3. Even the dharmas known by the saints are empty. Question. There really must be some non-empty dharmas. Why? Because there are differences between the things known by worldly people and the things known by the saints. The things known by worldly people are false, those known by the saints are true. One depends on the true knowledge of the saints to reject false dharmas. One cannot rely on lies to destroy lies. Answer. Destroying the things known by worldly people, that is the knowledge of the saints. But in the absence of worldly people, there are no dharmas of the saints, just as in the absence of illness, there is no medicine. This is why a sutra says, without the dharmas of worldly people, there are no dharmas of the saints. The true nature of the dharmas of worldly people, that is the dharmas of the saints. Moreover, saints do not seize any characteristic in dharmas and do not become attached to them. That is why the dharmas of the saints are really true. By contrast, worldly people seize characteristics in dharmas and are attached to them. That is why the dharmas of worldly people are false. Although the saints use empty dharmas, they do not seize any characteristics in them and, if